To call the City of Newark Planning Commission meeting of July 8th, 2025 to order. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And tonight we'll start with the roll call. Let the record reflect that 4 commissioners are present with the exception of Aguilar, he's absent tonight. And then on to item B, the minutes. Approval of the minutes of the regular Planning Commission meeting of June 24th, 2025. May I have a motion for the approval of the minutes?
I'll make the motion.
Okay, I have a motion from Commissioner Becker, and can I have a second?
Second.
Okay, I have a second from Commissioner Fitz. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Let the record reflect that the motion carries 4 ayes. On to written communication. Are there any written communications this evening?
No written communications this evening.
Okay, that one is closed. On to oral communications. This is the part of the meeting where members of the public are invited to address the Planning Commission on any item not listed on the agenda. Are there any members of the public who would want to address the Planning Commission under oral communications? No. Okay, on to item E, public hearings. There are no public hearing items this evening. We will move on to item F, staff reports. There are 2 tonight. The first one, item F1, the 2024 Housing Element Annual Progress Report by Yvonne Nguyen, which I will turn it over to her now.
Good evening, Chairperson and Commissioners. Tonight I will be presenting a brief summary of the 2024 Housing Element Annual Progress Report, which reflects the accomplishments for the second year of the 2023 to 2031 6th-cycle housing element. The period covered in this report is January 1st to December 31st, 2024. For tonight's agenda, I will provide a background on the housing element and the annual progress report, discuss Newark's regional housing needs allocation and housing production progress, highlight notable housing accomplishments in 2024, review progress on housing element programs, and go over any questions. On October 26, 2023, the City Council adopted Newark's 6th-cycle housing element after a robust community and stakeholder engagement process and presentation to the Planning Commission. Subsequently, the California Department of Housing and Community Development, HCD, certified the city's housing element on December 21st, 2023, finding it to be in compliance with state law. Pursuant to Government Code 65400, the housing element APR must be submitted to HCD and the Governor's Office of Land Use and Climate Innovation, LCI, by April 1st of each year. The APR reports on housing activity from the previous calendar year and provides the state and the public with an annual update on local government's progress towards meeting their regional housing needs allocation over the entire planning cycle. It also tracks the implementation of the goals, policies, and programs defined in each jurisdiction's housing element. This process gives local governments an opportunity to assess programs and identify necessary adjustments to improve implementation. The city has submitted a housing element APR to HCD and LCI each year since 2017 for the 2015 to 2023 5th cycle housing element, and has already submitted reports for the first 2 years of the 6th cycle, including the APR for 2024. Although this is the first year staff has presented an APR at a public meeting, each APR in successive years will be sent to the legislative body prior to April 1st. The 2024 APR will be forwarded to the City Council. A key part of the APR is tracking housing production and affordability to see if local governments are meeting the state-mandated target number of housing units each city must plan. This target is called the Regional Housing Needs, also known as RHNA. RHNA is based on projections from the State Department of Finance and distributed by regional planning agencies. Our region, ABAG, the Association of Bay Area Governments, assigns Newark's RHNA targets. For the sixth cycle, Newark must plan for 1,874 new housing units, a significant increase from the 1,078 units in the fifth cycle. These targets are broken down by income level to ensure housing is provided for residents at all income ranges as seen here. In 2024, the city entitled 162 new housing units. These 162 units were spread across 3 projects, 2 of which were multifamily and 1 of which was a single-family dwelling. 8% of units were for low-income households, with the remainder available to above moderate-income households. Along with entitlement projects, building permit progress is another key metric to assess RHNA progress. As issued, permits indicate that a project has received the necessary entitlements and can begin construction, signaling actual housing production activity that contributes towards meeting the city's assigned targets. The city issued building permits for 185 housing units in 2024. Approximately 43% of the total units permitted were part of the 79 Timber Senior Housing Affordable Project at 3760 Timber Street, which includes 79 very low-income rental units, 20 of which are dedicated to extremely low-income residents. About 41% of total units permitted were single-family dwellings intended for home ownership at above moderate rates. Accessory dwelling units accounted for the remaining 16% of the total units permitted in 2024. A total of 252 housing units were completed in 2024, as evidenced by the issuance of a certificate of occupancy during the reporting period. About 50% of completed units were provided to extremely low-income residents as part of the Home Keys Cedar Community Apartments project, which converted a hotel into 125-unit supportive housing facility for households experiencing or at risk of homelessness. Roughly 45% of completed units were single-family detached dwellings for above moderate income households, with the remainder consisting of ADUs. The table shown here summarizes the data by structure type. All of the 5+ unit structures were actually 70+ unit structures. In 2024, the city issued building permits for 29 ADUs, showing an increase of approximately 31% compared to the 9 ADUs permitted in 2023. Although fewer ADU permits were issued in 2022 and 2023, this does not necessarily mean that fewer applications were submitted during that time. Applications were likely to have been in the review process or processing phase. Looking ahead, ADU production is expected to grow once the city revises its ADU ordinance later in the year to comply with state law and implement best practices, which should help streamline the permitting process. Additionally, production is also likely to increase as interest rates decline, making financing more affordable and accessible for homeowners and developers. Compared to the previous year, the city experienced a decline in the number of housing units entitled, permitted, and completed. Between 2022 and 2024, entitled units dropped from 370 in 2022 to 162 units in 2024. This reflects a softening in the market for new construction due to the rising cost of debt, labor, and materials and is consistent with trends in other jurisdictions. Permit activity was also down compared to 2022, but increased slightly to 185 from a low of 91 permits issued in 2023. Much of the construction we are seeing being completed now stems from projects entitled in 2022 and earlier, when financing conditions were more favorable. There has been a sharp drop in new housing starts due to significant increase in interest rates. Developers are slowing down on submitting for entitlements, and entitled projects are delaying submitting for permits because they know they won't be able to finance new construction at this time. Industry experts anticipate tariffs will exacerbate this issue due to increased materials costs and stubbornly high interest rates. Despite the decline in recent development activity, the city is making progress towards its RHNA goals. As of 2024, the second year of the sixth cycle housing element, Newark has achieved approximately 26% of its overall RHNA target. Although 26% of the RHNA target is met, this figure represents the average units permitted across all income levels. The city is behind on its low and moderate income unit goals, ahead on very low income units, and on track for above moderate income units. The table presents the number of building permits issued for new housing units during the second year of the 2023 to 2031 planning period. In 2018, the fourth year of the fifth cycle housing element, the city reached approximately 46% of the RHNA target. However, there was no progress of very low, or moderate income units. By the end of the fifth cycle, the city surpassed its total RHNA target of 1,078 units. During the fifth cycle, the city provided 2,402 new housing units. However, Newark did not meet its targets for very low, and moderate income units. In the past year and ongoing, the city has made significant progress towards meeting its RHNA targets and advancing the development of affordable and accessible housing across all income levels. Key accomplishments include the Saha Thornton Avenue Apartments. Entitled in April 2025, this 5-story development will provide 59 affordable housing units, including 1 manager's unit. 10 units are designated for individuals with intellectual or development disabilities. The project fulfills half of the city's 20-unit goal under Housing Element Program H4.7, placing the city in a strong position early in the planning cycle. The city also permitted the Timber Senior Affordable Housing Project in 2024. This 79-unit affordable senior housing development, including 1 manager's unit and 20 units reserved for extremely low-income residents, is on track to open as early as December 2025. And lastly, the Home Key Cedar Community Apartments received a certificate of occupancy in 2024 and is now fully stabilized. Public safety data from the police and fire departments report that service calls have dropped to standard levels for multifamily housing, indicating a successful transition to long-term operations. And while the city has made notable progress over the past year, staff are continuing to implement remaining programs. A few programs scheduled for the review by the Planning Commission and/or City Council later in 2025 include a revised ADU ordinance, which will be reviewed by the Planning Commission and City Council later in the year to ensure compliance with state law and incentivize ADU development. The city is also preparing to release the RFP for a consultant to help develop a 5-year homeless action plan. This action is anticipated to go to City Council later this year for a contract service agreement. In October 2024, the city contracted a consultant to assist with developing objective design standards. The city held community and stakeholder engagement activities in winter 2024 and 2025 and anticipates bringing the objective design standards to the Planning Commission and City Council later in the year. The Just Cause eviction ordinance will go to City Council for review later this year, along with other policies and programs that advance housing element goal H4, keep people in their communities. A contractor has been selected for the first-time home buyer program design and administration and will go to City Council for approval of a contract services agreement. Lastly, the inclusionary housing ordinance will be presented to the Planning Commission and the City Council later this year to prioritize affordable units on site instead of prioritizing the collection of a housing impact fees. In response to the state's housing element compliant requirements, staff are working promptly and efficiently to implement all required programs within the 1-year deadline to ensure compliance with state housing law. This concludes my presentation, and I will be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Yvonne. That was very thorough, and I will open it up if any of the commissioners have questions.
Couple of questions. One, that number, the 3% number for low and moderate income levels, what is being done to address that? Is there something in the pipeline?
Commissioner Becker, which table were you referring to again?
The table that showed the progress. Right there. So the low and moderate income percentage of goal met is 3%. I know you had mentioned that, Yvonne. Do we have any projects in the pipeline that would address that number being as low as it is?
I can answer that one, Commissioner Becker. So for the moderate, those will likely come along with the fair kind of market type projects eventually. Right now, we've had a little bit of a slow start to these entitlements and some that are actually getting developed. There's a few projects that, well, there's one in the works, and that's the Maori Village project. At least as it's proposed today, there's 196 units that will fall into probably the above moderate. But in terms of some of the affordable, there's 30 units that'll be affordable, and they'll likely fall into the very low and low moderate. I'm sorry, okay. Very low and low income levels. So assuming that project goes forward and gets approved, then that will contribute to that. Those are the only real projects that are in the pipeline right now, okay, that will address that.
Yeah, that's always a challenge. Unfortunately, there's a lot of programs for very low, and of course, above moderate market rate homes. Mm-hmm. The developers are going to build those. It's really that kind of that tweener position that's always been the challenge.
Yeah, and I think as per City Council's kind of direction to staff is, every project that comes in, that's one of the discussions that we have is, for one, we look at these RHNA numbers and the levels, and we start having those discussions about how do we bring in those affordable units at the levels that are necessary, per the tables.
Yep, okay. And then my second question is, you mentioned a first-time home buyers assistance program, and I know probably the details haven't been worked out on that. In general, what is staff thinking about as far as a program like that?
Thank you for the question, Commissioner Becker. Michael Coolum, Housing Policy and Programs Manager. Typically, first-time homebuyer programs and the program as it's been imagined in our housing element would target moderate income households. Oftentimes, these programs take the form of a down payment assistance loan, but could possibly be designed to provide other types of financial assistance as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Anyone else? Commissioner
Yes,
Fitz.
excellent report, very thorough. I just wanted to know if, when the market conditions are such that there's high interest rates or money's not available and we can't get these things built, does the state penalize us for that? And how does that come into our thinking? Because, you have these market conditions sometimes where, businesses just don't invest. Does that affect our status with the housing element when we can't build them, even though we approved them?
No, it doesn't affect us in the immediate term. At some point down the line, after the years go by, of course, they will start to push us to do to make further progress. But at least right now, it doesn't seem like there'll be necessarily a penalty. But I think that's something that we'll address as the years, go by.
Great, thank you.
And Commissioner Fitz, I might add on to it a little bit of that, and perhaps Mr. Coulomb can add on as well. There is state legislation that, it doesn't necessarily penalize jurisdictions who don't meet the different affordability levels, but make it easier for developers to have a streamlined review process based upon a certain level of affordable units at specific income levels that they propose for their project. So recently, it's been determined that Newark has produced enough housing for us to be in, I don't think it's called a 50% bucket, but it means that if a developer comes along with a project that includes at least 50% of the units as affordable, they can go through a streamlined review process. Some jurisdictions have not produced as much housing as Newark, or just haven't seen those units come in yet, and they are at a lower threshold. So some jurisdictions, if a project comes in at 10% affordable, they go through a streamlined process as well. So that, in a way, is the state's either carrot or stick to try to encourage jurisdictions to have the right policies and programs and regulations in place that make it easier for affordable housing units to be developed within the community. Is that pretty close to correct?
Yes,
Mr.
very
Coulomb?
accurate.
Okay.
Director, yeah.
Good.
Did you have any questions?
No, just a simple question that you just mentioned that the city is going to help for the first-time home buyers in a financial. What about if they leave? If they leave the house that they can afford, so the city is going to, how are they going to get the money?
That's a very good question. Thank you for that, Commissioner. That will be something that we explore during the program design process. There are a couple of different models for how the program could be designed. But part of the role of the contractor, the consultant that we're bringing on, will be to monitor and manage those units so that we don't lose them and so that we don't lose any money if they are resold. They will have stipulations requiring that either they remain affordable or that the city gets back some portion of the appreciation from the resale, for example.
Thank you.
And I just had a couple questions. The Timber Senior Affordable Units, are those on Timber Street? I was just trying to figure out where they were.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Timber
All
and
right.
Central.
And then also the 5-year homeless action plan. Do we have any idea what's that going to look like? Like, is it a center where they come in for all services and they go from there? Or is it a place with beds or any ideas?
Yeah, as I think anticipated, the scope of work and an agreement with a consultant would help the city prepare a 5-year homeless action plan that's consistent with Alameda's County 5-year action plan as well. So we want to have the right policies and programs in place at the local Newark level that are consistent or at least complementary to what the county is doing. We think this would allow us to be eligible for certain funding that might become available. Certainly if we have the right policies and programs that are consistent with what the county is doing too, that we could take advantage of programs offered at the regional level. But it's not necessarily meant to create a physical center, although that might be something that perhaps the as an outcome of the effort, of the plan. It's not anticipated that that would be the case. It's more the development of policies and programs that would address Newark's unique homelessness issue within our community.
Okay, thank you. That was all I had. I don't think there are any questions from the public on this. Okay, so that is closed. So then I will go to item F2, the housing element update, and look ahead, presented by Michael Cullum.
Thank you, Honorable Chair and City Planning Commissioners. My name is Michael Coulomb, Housing Policy and Programs Manager with the Community Development Department. And I appreciate the opportunity to share with you this evening current housing policy trends and progress toward implementing our housing element. This is an informational item for this evening. There is no formal action, but I do welcome any questions and conversation in response to what I share this evening. And I look forward to giving a slight preview into some of our forthcoming program work. The agenda for tonight's presentation will include a bit of an expanded introduction, followed by some history into the housing element and housing element law in California, an evaluation of our housing need, trends and challenges in housing policy in California today, select housing element programs in progress or soon to launch, and then any questions and answers from the commission. So given the amount of work with our housing element, you're going to be seeing a lot of me. So I wanted to take a brief moment to introduce myself a bit more and share with you how I approach this work and why it means so much to me. I've had the privilege of living in and traveling to many different places. And every time before I set off for a new trip, my mother asked me, "Where will you sleep? Do you have a place to sleep?" Moms are really good at knowing what's most important for taking care of yourself. Thankfully, everywhere I've gone, I've experienced tremendous hospitality, and in all of those places, I've learned that regardless of people's race, religion, or whatever other factor, people just want a safe and stable place to call home where they can live with dignity and take care of themselves and those they care about. And so working in housing, I've learned that it's important that we all tell our own story. So the story that I want to tell starts with my grandma, Barbara Jean. This is her on the cover of the August 1956 edition of the Connecticut Home Builder magazine, along with my 2-year-old father and some man who has far more business being on a job site than they do. I'd like to think that I got my interest in home building from Barbara, as well as some of her good looks. Barbara and my grandfather were high school sweethearts, and they had 4 children before separating when they were in their mid-20s. My grandfather wasn't always around, and Barbara supported herself and her 4 kids as a banquet server, working long shifts, doing everything from setting up the room, taking orders, serving, bussing, and breaking it all down. Being a single mother in the 60s and 70s wasn't easy, as it isn't now, and Barbara had to make difficult decisions to provide for herself and her children. Those decisions were hard on my father and his siblings, and by the time he was in college, he'd become mostly estranged from his mother. With time, Barbara was able to get subsidized housing, and she moved into with my aunt. She went back to school and got a job with the state as a court reporter, which also came with health insurance. For the first time in her life, she was financially independent, and along with some coaxing from my own mother, my father and Barbara rebuilt their relationship. And so it's because of that my siblings and now nieces and nephews get to have Barbara in our lives. She's 93 now and still reminds me to save my steps when I go back and forth from the kitchen setting the table. So I'm telling you this because I think it's important to share the different ways in which affordable housing makes the impossible things possible. But also because I am grateful to work in a city that shares my values and leads with its community's interests at the top of mind. And so with that, I'll stay back in time and history for a moment to talk about the housing element. While housing elements have gotten much attention in California over the last few years, they've actually existed in state law for nearly half a century. A product of the civil rights movement, housing elements are California's way of implementing fair housing law by requiring all cities and counties to meet the housing needs of everyone in the community at all income levels. I highlight those words because I think oftentimes we speak about low and very low income communities, but I appreciate the questions tonight already about making sure that we're taking care of our middle class as well. So the recent hubbub about housing elements, flashing forward in time, is really the result of significant legislative activity that kicked off in 2018. Concerns about the price of housing and overall cost of living began bubbling up in the years since 2012, coinciding with the Bay Area tech boom. And so in 2018, the California legislature passed the Housing Omnibus Bill, which included several measures to beef up housing element reporting requirements and establishing consequences for not adopting a housing element or permitting the jurisdiction's required regional housing need allocation, or RHNA. At the same time, voters passed Prop 1, which was a $4 billion bond measure to fund affordable housing construction and rental and home loan subsidies for low and moderate income households. But what is the real housing need in the state of California? HCD publishes a statewide housing plan every 3 years. These don't always align with the housing element cycle schedule, but these plans do provide helpful data on total need and progress. And the story is that California needs 2.5 million more homes by 2030 to adequately address our housing needs, of which 1 million should be for low and very low income households. That's not just to house everybody, but that's to address the affordability crisis as well. 2.5 million is a huge number, and it may be difficult, if not impossible, to achieve by 2030. But at the very least, it's helpful in diagnosing the problem so we can start looking forward toward solutions. As Associate Planner Wynn presented, Newark has made steadfast progress toward addressing our own RHNA. During the last housing element cycle from 2015 to 2023, we permitted nearly 2.5 times our RHNA. While we fell short in targets for very low, and moderate income units, it doesn't hurt to overproduce in other areas. The market rate units, as Deputy Director Interiano mentioned, did produce some inclusionary affordable units and also filled our housing impact fee fund with resources that we can now use to support low and moderate income home seekers in our current housing element. If you're noticing any discretion in these numbers and the report from Assistant Planner Wynn, that's because HCD allows jurisdictions to claim units that are produced in the projection period, which is effectively the overlap between cycles, but that projection period is not captured in this data dashboard from HCD's webpage. So then looking at our 6-cycle data, we are 25% through the cycle and making good progress with our very low and above moderate income units. And we do have a pipeline of households, of projects that will provide additional units across the board. So all in all, I think we're in pretty good shape at this cycle. Okay. So what are the challenges then to meeting the RHNA and serving our community? To start, the biggest challenge is that we are starting from a pretty big deficit. While the last few years may have felt like a big construction boom, statewide we've actually been building below the 40-year average, which is the middle horizontal line going across this chart. The horizontal line at the top of the chart is the amount of units we need per the statewide housing plan to permit each year to meet that need. We've only reached that line once in the last 40 years, back in 1986. And so while some have called the last 10 years a boom in multifamily construction, I think that this graph is helpful in visualizing that in those 10 years, we've actually been building at rates more akin to the recessions of the early 80s and 90s. So we'll need to find a way to build more like we used to. Also compounding the problem is that we've added far more jobs in the last decade than we have housing units. In Alameda County before the pandemic, we had about 4 jobs for every 1 housing unit. A healthy jobs to housing ratio is typically around 1.2 to 1.5, which provides enough demand to induce new development and support the economy, but not so much pressure as to squeeze out existing residents. Not only have we added jobs, but the jobs we have added pay exceptionally high wages. The bottom chart compares 1990 household incomes in green to 2018 household incomes in orange. You'll see that in 1999, our household income distribution, which is reflected by the green dotted line, reflected a bell curve, indicative of a more middle-class economy. But by 2018, that curve had become an upward sloping line, reflecting tremendous growth in high-income households and a decrease in moderate and lower-income households. And then according to a more recent report from Alameda County, moderate income households now only make up about 17% of all households in the county, whereas high earners, those making over $239,000 a year, make up 42% of households. So the conclusion here is that our middle class is shrinking, and folks who might once have been moderate income are more likely to be considered lower income or to have moved away. With the confluence of scarcer housing supply, increased demand from high earners, we've seen tremendous increases in the price of housing. Newark is in the San Francisco, Oakland, Fremont metropolitan statistical area, which is the graph on the top. But obviously we're very close to the San Jose, Sunnyvale, Santa Clara MSA2, which is the graph on the bottom. It now takes more than 10 times the median income to purchase a median priced home in our area, and 12 times the median income in the San Jose MSA. For context, the national average is 5, which is about where we were up until about the year 2000, and then things started escalating. Looking at this another way, the cost of home buying in Alameda County has increased by 64% just since 2020. The cost of a mortgage and taxes for a bottom tier home, basically what your monthly payment is now about $5,414 a month. And to comfortably pay that, you'd need a household income of about $140,000. Buying a mid-tier home, one in a better neighborhood, maybe better, well kept, perhaps a little bigger, would cost about a household of $230,000. Many folks are finding it's more economical to rent, seeing as the average monthly rent is half the price of that bottom tier mortgage. And so home ownership is increasingly growing out of reach. This data is specific to Newark. It's from a local realtor, the Juliana Lee Realtor team of Silicon Valley Real Estate. In Newark, for the second quarter of 2025, the median home sale price was $1.3 million. Per square foot, costs have increased by 7.1% in the last 5 years. Rents are also increasing. It says, albeit slower, but that's an increase of 242% as opposed to a 300% increase in sales prices. I think a big takeaway here is that low-income households can no longer afford the median rent in Alameda County, whereas 20 years ago they could. This means more people are being priced out, overpaying, or living in substandard conditions. That then puts increased costs on us in government to address these market failures through things like increased rental subsidies, code enforcement, rental inspections, and so on. So looking at cost burden, which is one of the things we're required by legislation to include in the housing element, we see that across the board, folks in Newark are spending more than 30% of their household income on housing costs, with 1 in 10 Newark households being severely cost burdened, meaning they spend more than 50% of their income on housing. Once you pay for housing, that leaves little left over for education, childcare, or a safety net in the event of a medical event, car crash, or so on. That's acute among renters. 2/5 of renters are cost burdened, with nearly 1/3 being severely cost burdened. A lot of people have decided that the cost of living in the Inner Bay Area has just become too much. Those migrant flows are particularly strong in southern Alameda County, with people from our area predominantly going to the San Joaquin County cities of Tracy, Stockton, and Manteca. The people who are leaving, may have been here for generations, but they just can't compete against the folks that are making higher incomes in Santa Clara, San Mateo, or San Francisco. Those people themselves probably make good money but can't afford a home in Santa Clara, San Mateo, or San Francisco, and so they are moving here. We see that over 1/3 of the people that are taking part in this migration are doing so because of housing as their primary motivation. Either they think they can get a better or larger home in the Central Valley, become a homeowner there, or just generally they're in search of cheaper housing than we have on offer. This has other negative effects based around the fact that most of the jobs are still here in the Inner Bay area, and our jobs pay better than jobs in the Valley. So we see increased rates of super commutes, which are people who drive more than 50 miles one way for work. This results in increased congestion on our freeways and associated greenhouse gas emissions. Finally, this puts changes on our labor market, challenges finding low and mid-wage workers, and community and social disruption as long-term neighbors and support systems are scattered around the mega region. One final graph I'll show on this, illustrating the impact to travel patterns of workers of different industries and wages. This shows that lower wage industries, such as agriculture, hospitality, and retail, are losing workforce or seeing their workforce commute longer and longer distances. This worker is choosing the longer commute because wages are higher here, and there's more work here than in Merced, for example. I got an email the other day from the general manager of the Doubletree Hotel asking to be connected with the general contractor for the Saha project because they know that most likely the construction workers for that project will live in the valley and have temporary accommodations here while working. This graph here, moving on to demographic change. Generally speaking, what this graph is showing is population change from the 2010 to 2020 censuses. Green represents increase in population, red represents decreases, white represents no change. The deeper the color, the greater the change. Newark's population trends generally track with countywide trends. We've had moderate growth overall, but with decreases in white and black populations. Growth is more so driven by increases in Latino and Asian populations. Another thing to note here is that the average Alameda County household is now older and less likely to include children, but interestingly larger overall. This indicates an increase in multi-generational housing, roommates are doubling up situations, which is an indicator of our housing supply shortage. I think looking at this graph again by race is interesting. We see that the only area in which the black population increased and where the white population loss was the least is in the Bayside area, which, as you all know, is where we've built significant new housing over the last 10 years. But also, this is a place where we've built a lot of different types of housing, from multifamily to townhomes, condos, and single family. We've had a great diversity of housing types there, serving a diversity of people at different household incomes and sizes. We see that trend again reflected in the change of Asian and Latino populations. Bayside attracted significant growth and was the only area in the city with good growth in the Latino population. I wanted to make a quick note here on the national implications of this change. While our population is growing, that growth has slowed, and we're actually below the national growth rate now. After the 2020 census, we got a little warning sign of this when we actually, for the first time in our history, lost a congressional seat. And it's now being predicted that at this rate of slower growth, we could lose an additional 4 to 5 congressional seats and electoral college votes in 2030. The map on the right shows the states that are losing seats in yellow and orange and the states that are gaining population and seats in blue. So we're predicted to have the biggest loss. This would have significant impacts on electoral politics. And so in summary of this section of the presentation, we see that the housing element is a valuable tool for advancing equal housing rights, that state and regional housing supply have not kept pace with demand, renters and homeowners are struggling with rising costs, and residents of all income levels are leaving the region with negative impacts. Solving this won't happen overnight and will require sustained effort over the next 10 to 20 years. So what's in our way now? And I promise this is my last section of bleakness. And then we can get on to the call to action. But I want to talk quickly about 4 big trends. We talked about history, some 4 big current trends. So right now, not only is the purchase price of a home at an all-time high, but interest rates are also reaching record highs. Nationwide, growth in the number of homeowners halved in just the year from 2023 to 2024. The largest drop in homeowners occurred among people under the age of 35, meaning young people are becoming homeowners later or just not at all. In addition to that, most of our current homeowners bought their homes or refinanced them during the low interest rate period of a few years ago. To move now and refinance and finance a new home, they'd pay a significant penalty. So as a result, those would-be sellers are choosing to stay put, which is impacting our inventory and making it harder for new people to get on the homeownership ladder. These high interest rates are also impacting multifamily housing starts, as Assistant Planner Wynn mentioned. What happened, you can kind of see in this graph, is that those interest rates shot up just as a lot of new housing inventory was coming online. So there was a sudden increase in supply, which helped to stabilize rents, which is what we want. But as the interest rates went up and rents stabilized, there wasn't enough income to make these new projects feasible. So that's why we're seeing projects get entitled, but developers are holding off on permitting them because they can't presently get the financing to build those projects. A second challenge is major long-running shifts in the labor market. While our demand for housing has increased, our labor force is shrinking. Key trades like the carpenter saw a workforce decline of 30%, and iron and rebar workers decreased by 52%. Part of this is likely due to the fact that construction worker wages haven't meaningfully increased in nearly 20 years. This chart shows the misalignment between multifamily permits issued and construction employment. The blue line is multifamily permits and the beige is workforce. In 2012, we saw an inversion of these lines where permits outpaced the workforce. So the workforce has struggled to rebuild its ranks after losing significant workers in the Great Recession. And a 2019 survey of general contractors in California found that over 60% of firms are having a hard time filling some or all positions. And then on top of that, construction sector productivity has also been decreasing since the 70s, while other sectors have seen significant increase in labor productivity. A lot of attention is turned to analyzing construction costs. If we can't control interest rates and we can't control the labor force, what can we do to bring down costs? A recent report by the RAND Institute has garnered a lot of attention for its analysis of this issue, finding that California has some of, if not the highest, residential multifamily construction costs in the nation. And according to that report, the Bay Area is actually the most expensive place to build. Low-income housing is 1.5 times the cost of the average market rate project here in California. But when you compare us to other regions, our market rate housing is 1.6 times more expensive to build than San Diego. Our affordable housing, 1.5 times more expensive than San Diego. But where it really gets bad is when you compare us to states like Colorado and Texas. Computer might have just died.
All of ours did.
Oh, okay, it's not just me, thank goodness.
We'll just take it.
Well, I'll just continue that thought maybe while they come back up. Our affordable housing and market rate housing costs 3 to 4 times more to build in the Bay Area than it does in the state of Texas. And while we may not want to adopt everything that Texas does, there are things worth looking at in their policies.
Just give us like one moment. And we'll try to
Sure.
bring it back.
Yeah, it's because my battery is
Do you want to
low.
maybe try, Michael, maybe unplugging your computer and then plugging it back in?
Could I use your computer? Okay.
Oh, quite an eye-opening report.
It's very sobering, definitely.
Oh, the connection to the individual computer? Oh, okay. Michael, you just might need a,
Yeah, we're going to change to Art's computer.
oh, okay.
Apologies. Okay. Yes. Okay. Okay. And so the other major finding from that RAND report is that our development timelines are also significantly longer than other states, and that those timelines are strongly associated with higher costs. So in California, on average, it takes 22 months longer to complete a project than Texas. Again, Texas is the more extreme end of the spectrum, but specifically that 22-month gap breaks down into a 15-month gap in development approvals and then a 7-month gap in construction. I put time as money here because that 22-month gap results in increases in contractor general conditions, architectural and engineering fees, higher costs for carrying the land, debt, and property taxes without generating rental income, and then higher labor costs for having laborers on the job for longer periods of time. And as we just went over, that labor force is scarce. So in summary, our high interest rates are depressing multifamily housing starts and homeownership. There's not enough construction labor for all the housing we need to build. Construction labor growth is trending down when we need it most. Construction costs are among the highest in the nation. Development timelines are also among the longest in the nation, and we need to figure out how to use scarce dollars and workers more efficiently to meet our housing need. So the policy response to a lot of this research, and thankfully we're in a place where we have a lot of research and a lot of people thinking about these issues, I've kind of broken down into four primary buckets. The first are policies that are intended to speed up land use approvals and permitting, such as shot clocks on local agency approval and processing times, limits on local agency discretionary decision-making, CEQA reform and streamlining. You may very well have heard about a lot of this stuff in the news lately. The second is policies and programs intended to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Policies intended to improve project financial feasibility. I think the density bonus law is a good example of that, where financial feasibility, is often used as a justification to entitle projects to the use of density bonus. And then also policies intended to reduce displacement and entrances into homelessness. So these are big challenges. These are big problems. They're not all our responsibility, and we do not have the power to address all of them. So we have to figure out what levers that we can pull versus what are the ones that the state could pull, Uncle Sam, or of course, the invisible hand. And I think Newark's housing element is really our strongest lever. While our arena is a high number, 1,874 homes, that's less than we permitted in Cycle 5. And that was a good exercise and a good learning opportunity in looking at how we can better meet our very low and moderate income units. And we're setting off on a good step to do so. I do think that this is achievable if we stick to our plan, the goals of our housing element, and keep to the mission of serving our community at the forefront. And so now at long last, I'm going to give you a brief preview of some of the programs that we've been working on that will be coming to you and or City Council in the coming months that will work towards these goals. The first up that I wanted to feature is a community-driven plan for the Four Corners area. The housing element set a quantified objective of increasing housing and local retail in this area. We're talking about the corner of Jarvis and Newark Boulevard, with a minimum target of 360 new homes, but there could be potential for more. And then this program really specifically aligns with statewide policies and associated legislation to incentivize transit-oriented development. And what transit, you might be asking? In November, the Capital Corridor Joint Powers Authority approved the EIR for the South Bay Connect project, which would build a new commuter rail station at the Ardenwood Park and Ride just on the other side of Highway 84 from us. The EIR also shows that the station would have a pedestrian and bicycle access point to Newark under State Route 84. The image here on the slide is from the EIR. It's the station area looking north from Highway 84. Plan components might include revisions to residential and commercial zoning standards, including mixed-use development, station access studies and improvements, vehicle and bicycle parking standards and management policies, affordable housing and commercial stabilization policies, and an affordable housing siting analysis, as well as potential interagency collaboration with the City of Fremont and Capital Corridor Joint Powers Authority. A second program that will be coming your way is Objective Design Standards, or ODS. The goal that this program falls into is one of reducing and removing constraints to affordable housing development. Our housing element aims at states that developing new objective design standards will result in designs that reflect the needs of the community while supporting new developments that are responsive to local ecological conditions and climate change while reducing development costs where applicable. ODS were established as a legal concept in SB 35, one of those big 2018 housing bills, and then incorporated into several other housing laws since then. And they govern how jurisdictions review applications for all sorts of residential projects, from ADUs to duplexes, large multifamily apartments, and condos. As a result, ODS are really now the primary basis for a local agency to deny or augment a project. Many jurisdictions have language in their codes stating, for example, the roof line shall be compatible with the neighborhood character. But what one person finds compatible with the neighborhood character may not be compatible in the eyes of another person. And that subjective interpretation of compatibility could change from staff to staff, commissioner to commissioner, council to council. That can be difficult for an applicant to interpret and result in more back and forth between the applicant and the jurisdiction until that definition of compatibility is reached and mutually agreed to. I think another big benefit of ODS is that they go through a lengthy public process. Many of you participated in one-on-one interviews with our consultant working on developing the ODS, attended the workshop open house that we had this winter. And in this way, by collecting community input, undergoing community review and the local legislative process, the theory behind ODS is that project approvals can actually be more inclusive than by conducting a project-by-project review. And so finally, by clearly communicating to builders the community's vision, standards, and acceptable practices, it's the aim of ODS to reduce development costs and timelines through transparency and streamlined review. And we hope to present these to you later this summer and early fall. During the process of drafting the housing element, we heard significant concerns from residents about the pressures that renters were feeling and the increased pressure of displacement. The housing element includes several programs to protect tenants to help them stay in their homes. Some of these programs include adopting ordinances that will codify state laws that would otherwise sunset in coming years, or use the city's affordable housing fund to expand services that the county has at times offered, but which are significantly oversubscribed, and we know that there's additional need for in Newark. And so we've conducted extensive outreach to renters and landlords alike and anticipate presenting recommendations to council in early fall. Some of these recommendations will be for housing element programs. Some will be for programs that resulted out of that community engagement process, but were included in the housing element. We touched on the first-time homebuyer program earlier this evening, but for a long time it's been a council priority to establish a first-time homebuyer program, and the city released an RFP for those consultant services. We've now completed our evaluation of proposals, and we'll be recommending that council authorize the city manager approve a contract with a consultant to develop and administer 2 programs this coming month. The first program is that first-time homebuyer assistance loan program, and then the second is affordable homeownership administration, also known as really managing our deed-restricted homeownership units, such as the Lapakshi affordable homes, which are in our pipeline. Okay. And then coming towards the end, we have our inclusionary zoning work. We aim to present this to you, the Planning Commission, later this summer in response to Council's direction to amend the city's affordable housing program. That's Chapter 17.18 of the Newark Municipal Code. Currently, the code requires housing developers pay a fee to mitigate their housing impact. And as an alternative, they can pay to build, as an alternative, they can build those affordable units. But council have directed and staff will recommend changing this requirement to prioritize on-site construction of affordable units with payment of a fee as one possible alternative. And my last slide here is on various zoning amendments. The housing element includes several programs related to zoning that respond to several different policy objectives. We won't be tackling all of these at once. And we're also working in a package of minor zoning code cleanups. But we've identified a suite of housing element programs that advance several policy initiatives and bring us into compliance with state law. I've included here on this slide, and I can certainly circulate this to you, some of the works that I've cited in this presentation if you're interested in looking at any of these reports further yourself. And now I welcome any questions, comments, conversation from the commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. That was very eye-opening, very sobering. So thank you for making us aware of the urgency of this and how we compare to other states. Do any commissioners have comments or questions?
No.
Other than I thought it was an outstanding report. It's 35 years I've been either writing these reports or listening to them. It's the first time I had a staff member actually do an introduction of their family history. So I found that interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, it was actually quite humorous, I thought. That makes everybody laugh, but sometimes it's not. One of the things I had, I know we've talked about the ADUs and stuff. It doesn't seem like we're really having that much of a surge in applications for ADUs. Is there something we could do to speed that up, or is there something that, because that seems to me like a quick way you could get some additional housing units if there were more ADUs allowed on certain properties?
Mm-hmm. Yes, good question. One of the programs that we're working on is the ADU incentives program. So we're kind of nearing towards the end of that, and so that'll be coming forward to the commission in the next probably like 2 months. As part of that effort, we're looking to make some changes not only in the zoning code to help kind of incentivize those, but also allowing larger units and potentially even some reductions in the types of fees that are charged for them. So we're hoping that with some of those efforts that the number of ADUs will increase going forward. And so that's what's going on.
And I've seen some advertisements for prefabbed, already built ADUs that can be installed very quickly. And some jurisdictions have pre-approved contractors and plans to reduce the amount of time it takes to build one of those things too. Mm-hmm. So we don't have any restrictions on off-site manufactured housing that would slow that down, or?
We don't have any kind of limitations in that sense, but in terms of the pre-approved plans, that is part of that ADU incentive program also that's coming forward to you. Essentially working with making it more easily available for anybody who's looking to develop these, to see not only existing plans that have already been approved so that they can kind of see what is possible and what the city has already kind of approved, but also allowing architects and designers to have pre-approved plans on our webpage so any citizen or resident who lives here can come and kind of look at those also as a potential option for them, in case they're looking to do that. So those are the different ways that we're trying to kind of get that information out there. To give residents more confidence in starting the process.
Good, thank you. That's the only question I had.
So aside from cutting down on the permit time to get the job started, so to streamline it, the big key would be just having the labor force. So like needing construction workers and not having as many as, say, Texas, which probably has a lot. That's why they're able to build so quickly. So that would be something that would still kind of be a slowdown for construction, just the labor force, lack of labor force.
I think labor force is going to be an obstacle to scaling up construction and meeting our need. The other significant driver there is the interest rates and the cost and availability of financing. The recent federal budget bill actually looks to have increased the availability of financing for low-income housing, but we'll have to see how that interacts with other elements of the bill. And then additionally, at the state level, they are looking at reforms to state affordable housing subsidy programs to help get that money out faster and easier so that projects can break ground quicker.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, I don't think there's any questions from the public. Okay,
I thought before we leave, I might put one plug into how we are, obviously, we're doing a ton of work here, and the staff is to be commended about taking on the requirements and the policies and programs as outlined in the housing element. But this is a complex topic for sure. There's lots of different factors that feed into how we kind of got to where we're at. And for, I think, a lot of people who are not involved on this in a day-to-day basis, it can get a little overwhelming, right? So like, what can we really do as a city? And how do I even get to really understand what the problems are in Newark, or what is Newark really doing? So staff over the past few months or so has created that you can see up on your screen here that is public. We haven't made a big deal out of it yet because I think we're still tweaking it to some degree, but it's really intended to be a one-stop shop for folks to learn about affordable housing, learn about what Newark's vision and goals, policies and programs out into the future, about how we are going to address housing within the city, provide resources, and describe our current efforts and announcements. And so if you go onto this site, you can certainly learn about affordable housing and see some pages about what that really means within the community. You could also learn a lot about our housing element. And this page, and actually this website was kind of born out of, if you might recall, the housing element website, development website that we use to communicate with the community about the production and of our housing element. And so you can learn about kind of what a housing element is and find out a lot of detailed information about what is in our housing element. There are housing resources pages, so going into what's happening locally and regionally with regard to housing, housing assistance and supportive services. There is and I haven't clicked on this for a while, so I'm not exactly sure where it's going to go, but if you're looking for housing in Newark and in the region, there is information here that you can go to, including maps to show like where housing could eventually be. And then we have a whole page dedicated to our current efforts of what we're doing within the community, as well as announcements of things that are coming up for the community to be aware of. So we really see this as a great opportunity and learning tool for the public to learn about what Newark is doing. We are doing a lot for a city of our size. I would say we're punching above our weight in terms of the types of programs and policies that we are implementing. And I think over time, we certainly will be providing a greater sense of resources and opportunities for our community members in the housing space. So I'm very proud of the work that our team is doing with regards to implementation of the housing element and certainly reaching out to the community about how the community can get involved and learn about the things that we are doing. So thank you very much for your time.
this seems like a really amazing website. Is it like up and running? Is it going to go out in a Newark newsletter
Yep.
to let people know, or how is it going to get out to
You
the
can
general
find it
public?
right up there at housing.newarkca.gov.
And is it to
And
get out to the general public?
It is live, and we haven't done a full sort of announcement or release of it. Certainly, we have been directing folks to it sort of as needed, but as we certainly come back to the Planning Commission and City Council with a lot of these policy programs that we're working on, I think we'll make a bigger deal about this site being a resource for people to go to.
Thank you, yeah.
I kind of surprised staff with bringing this up, but I thought it was important to be able to show how we're taking some very complex information and making it hopefully more digestible for the public.
Yeah, it's very nice, thank you. Okay, on commission matters, report on city council actions.
Just one action to report on. At the last Planning Commission meeting, the Planning Commission adopted a resolution for the approval of the Prologis Industrial Warehouse Building on Central Avenue. That project was called up for review by the City Council, meaning that they are going to take a look at the Planning Commission's adoption of that and perhaps take action on that project, whether to reaffirm the Planning Commission's decision, to modify it, or to overturn it. Calling a project up for review is an allowed process as defined in our municipal code. One council member is able to call up any decision of either the planning director, the zoning administrator, or the Planning Commission. And in this case, the Prologis project was requested to be brought forth in front of the council for review. That review is going to take place on July 24th, so the second council meeting in July, and we will provide the staff report and information to the Planning Commission ahead of time so you can see what we're presenting to council.
Thank you.
That's all to report tonight.
Okay,
Thank you.
so we'll go on to H, Planning Commissioner comments. Any comments?
Nothing this evening?
Nothing from me either.
Nothing.
I just want to say I'm really, really glad that the door at the library is finally fixed for people with strollers or walkers. It's been out for over a month, and so if you have a walker, a stroller, or a wheelchair, you couldn't get in the library unless somebody did the door for you. So that's nice to have that finally fixed. It was because the part was on back order for so long. The library was on it, but they were just stalled because it was on back order. And also, I don't know if anyone knows, but the sign at Mirabeau Park is in. They're just waiting for the poles, which come in this month. So it'll be nice to have that sign back up at the park, so that's good.
Great.
That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you.
Okay, no other comments? Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent.
Sign it.